take a slight detour, mostly because of my limited understanding of the subject we are talking about in this conference. I'm coming, like I'll try to add my experience of working with a lot of legal researchers for the past 5-6 years, scholars, practitioners, who are trying to work with data. I'm an engineer myself, so I'm not a lawyer. But what I want to question here and put a question to all of you, and when we are saying all this data is accessible, uh, is it really accessible? So let me give you an example. So for the last 4-5 years, we are running this project called the Justice Hub. Now, what the Justice Hub is all about, it started as if some of you might have heard of this Harvard Dataverse and similar other projects. A lot of research happens outside academia. And what happens to the data when let's say a paper is published, or let's say a platform is developed, but what happens to the data? Usually it sits within some laptop somewhere and it gets lost. Or let's say someone files a bunch of RTI applications, they conduct their research, they write a few media reports, but then what happens to the data collected from this? So the idea was to, like, we knew a few people who were doing this, so can we request them to share something publicly, because it is supposed to be public, and can we in this way create a good corpus of good quality data sets? Now, I was in touch with a lot of people, and apparently like everyone had some data or the other, but in a way, let's say they were Excel files which are not very like formatted, and there were a bunch of issues. People were not confident sharing their data, and these are the various reasons. Now, a few good projects which also came out. I'll give you a few examples if you know. There was this project called the Zombie Tracker, which was created by this organization called Internet Freedom Foundation. They relied on the data by e-courts. Then Project 39A collects data from courts to write about death penalty. Then I think a couple of years back, the team at Article 14, they curated a bunch of cases from courts to research about sedition. They created a platform which is out there. So these are a bunch of examples. Imagine in such a vast country, if I personally have spoken to a lot of people in this domain. So, so I personally feel, so, and every project, how the journey is, you start with a, let's say, and I was involved in some capacity in all of these projects. I'll give you an example of how the journey starts and how it unfolds. So let's say the first thing, okay, I want to collect data of Section 66A under the Information Technology Act. Why? Because that has been declared unconstitutional, but IFF being the work, given the kind of work they do, people were calling them that I am, an FIR has been filed against me under Section 66A. But that is unconstitutional. So that was the trigger. Oh, now, okay, which means that something is happening in the country. So how do you start? Okay, let's see if we can find some cases in courts. FIRs mostly are not public. In some states they are, but let's forget about the FIR for now. Now let's say we do this pilot analysis for 10 or 11 states. First we go to NCRB. NCRB we check, okay, are there any cases there? Obviously, NCRB also it's not very disaggregated, but you try to analyze, okay, what are the states you should focus this analysis on? Because this is IT Act, let's focus on the metros. Maybe more people are, using social media there, and that's why this is happening. So you select a bunch of states, and then you go to e-courts. Now, once you go to e-courts, then it's a whole journey. So first step is, okay, how do you get this data? Professor Aparna said that it's one of the most difficult fields to conduct research in, and also it's the most expensive. Even climate research today, there are good data sets available. But when it comes to legal research, what happens is it's a very, especially quantitative legal research, it's a very interdisciplinary field. I've been also talking to a lot of people, students, faculty members within academia, and not a lot of, maybe a lot of research is happening there, but a lot of research also happens outside academia, where let's say you're working with a statistician or data scientist, you have a lawyer, you have a legal researcher, so it's a very interdisciplinary field. So then, if it takes 6 to 8 months just to get data, clean that data, start that analysis, suppose you get a grant, and you have a 1-year grant to conduct this analysis, 8 months goes into cleaning the data. So then will you say that the data is really accessible? And this is one common story which has happened across all the projects which I have mentioned, and it still continues to this date. We've also spoken to the E-Committee of the Supreme Court. They have built good platforms. One of them is the NJDG. But somehow, now the NJDG, I think in the last panel discussion, someone said that it's anonymized. It's not anonymized, it's aggregated. But even, let's say, though it's aggregated, if you have to do something with that data, you will need to fetch that data outside the platform and bring it to your laptop, do whatever you want to do with it. That process is really difficult. I use a technical term here, API, which means just a way to get information. So then none of those are available for any of the platforms here. What people end up doing is they will scrape data, or it's a way to pull data from a website. But so if you speak to a lawyer or if you speak to someone, then people will say that this is illegal. So what is legal, what is illegal, data is available, not available. If it's available, it's not very well documented. So I personally feel legal data is not accessible most of the cases, especially when it comes to district courts, it is not accessible. Now, the other thing here is, how do we, like, what do we do about this? So I also feel it's not a lot of people are working, especially if I speak to a lawyer or someone who is not from, let's say, does not work with technology in any way or form. The first thing is, though there is curiosity to do, but when it comes to engaging with data, then it's like, oh, there's some fear or something that, no, this is not something that I want to do, or I can do, or I can engage with, which means that suddenly the demand drops. And if the demand drops, if you are not requesting a lot of data, then obviously 2012 or 2013 was when eCourts was launched. Obviously, if you look at the data from 2012, you compare it to the last year, the quality has improved, but not what it should be at this stage. It's some more way, I personally feel if we can create more demand, then it will in some way or form help the overall quality of the data as well. One thing to people sitting here, nowadays we have something, I think all of you know about ChatGPT, Claude, and these large language models. Whatever you feel about these, ethical, non-ethical, useful, not useful, one thing to think about is this had really made possible for I personally feel, and this is something which I have experienced also, if I'm working with a lawyer and they are using, let's say, either of these models to work on a data set, their productivity has just improved massively. Which means that I can't write that prompt. Let's say what Rangin sir was just telling about, okay, if you have the data, these are the things you have to analyze. Now, an engineer won't be able to write that prompt, but a lawyer will, because of their understanding of the data, their understanding of the field. So they will be able to do a lot more with data. So I think this is one thing that we should also test and keep promoting if you're working with students, or if you're working with other researchers, that let's use these tools and see what is the max we can do with it. And I personally feel that overall productivity has improved a lot in terms of, let's say if I give you an Excel file, or if you start with this hypothesis, okay, I want to know how many cases under 66A has been registered in Delhi and what has happened to all of these cases. Now you go to eCourts, you will take 2 months to download the data, clean it, do that. But now there is this one data set which was published by this organization called Development Data Lab. It was, I think, last I checked, it was available till 2018, but they are also planning to update it. So it has 80 million cases, out of which I think 10 to 12 million are criminal cases. Just suppose you have this data set, which is, you can just now go and download that data set, maybe figure out a way to upload it to an LLM or do something about it, and then ask these questions. You don't have to clean the data, you don't have to do anything. See, I'm not saying this will be 100% accurate and you will not publish the results, but this is just made it possible to do all this in the least amount of time. So, which was really hard a couple of months back. Yeah, I think overall these are my points in terms of, I personally feel it is not yet accessible, but now we have ways to start working with data. Yeah.